Claire Donovan adjusted the sleeve of her silk blouse as she sat in her wheelchair, feeling the familiar weight of unease press down on her chest. The restaurant was beautiful, dimly lit chandeliers casting soft glows over elegant tables, but it felt suffocating to her. At 34, she was the CEO of a fast-rising tech company in Los Angeles, admired by many and feared by competitors. Yet here, on this blind date, she felt none of that power. All she felt was vulnerability. Ever since the car accident, she avoided moments like this, where her wheelchair became the silent center of attention. Her best friend Jenna had begged her to try. "You can't keep hiding, Claire," she'd said gently. "There are people who'll see you, not just the chair." Claire had reluctantly agreed, but deep down she doubted anyone ever truly would. The men she'd met after her accident often tried to mask their discomfort, offering sympathy she didn't want, or worse, pity. Tonight would be no different, she assumed. She sighed, glancing at the restaurant entrance, expecting the polished, suited man Jenna had described. Instead, the sight that greeted her left her momentarily stunned. A tall man entered, slightly rugged, wiping his hands on a rag as if he'd just come straight from work. He wasn't wearing a suit but a button-up shirt with rolled sleeves, the faintest smear of grease still clinging to the fabric. His brown hair was slightly tousled, and his smile was disarmingly warm. Claire blinked in confusion. Surely this wasn't her date. The man scanned the room, then walked toward her table with surprising confidence. When he reached her, he offered a grin and said, "You must be Claire. I'm Jake. Sorry for the dramatic entrance." Claire hesitated, caught between shock and embarrassment. This was not what she expected. Jake, 36 and a mechanic by trade, looked completely out of place in the high-end restaurant. Yet he didn't seem self-conscious about it. Instead, he pulled out the chair across from her with an ease that surprised her. "I know," he chuckled, catching her expression. "I don't exactly scream blind date material. You're probably wondering if your friend has a twisted sense of humor." His candid words made her want to laugh, though she quickly bit it back. She wasn't sure how to process him yet. Instead of commenting, she nodded politely. "I was expecting someone different," she admitted softly. Jake leaned back in his chair, still smiling. "Story of my life. People usually expect me to be somewhere under a car, not in a place with tablecloths." His voice was light, carrying none of the judgment she'd grown accustomed to in others. He didn't glance at her wheelchair, didn't fidget, didn't shift uncomfortably in his seat. He just looked at her directly, as though she were anyone else sitting across from him. That alone unsettled Claire in ways she hadn't expected tonight. The waiter came, handing menus, and Claire used the moment to steady herself. Her heart was beating faster than it should, and she hated that. Blind dates weren't supposed to matter. She'd told herself she didn't care, but something about Jake's relaxed manner felt disarming. "You know," he said after the waiter left, "I almost didn't come. I thought, why would someone like you ever want to meet a guy like me? But then I figured, hey, worst case, at least I get a good meal." His honesty made her chuckle quietly despite herself, surprising her even more. Claire found herself studying him closely, trying to decipher whether he was putting on an act or truly this genuine. His hands, rough and calloused, told the story of years of hard work. His eyes, a warm hazel, carried no trace of pity or judgment. She was so used to being evaluated as the CEO in the wheelchair that she almost didn't know how to handle someone simply seeing her as Claire. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of curiosity rather than dread. It scared her, but it also made her lean in slightly. Jake's words flowed easily, his self-deprecating humor somehow cutting through the heaviness Claire usually carried. He spoke about his garage, the joy of fixing up old cars, and his mischievous niece, who thought his job made him a superhero. "She thinks I can fix anything," he said with a grin. "But truth is, I can barely fix myself most days." Claire laughed softly, then caught herself, surprised at the sound. It had been months since she'd laughed so freely. She quickly masked it with a sip of water, but the warmth of it lingered in her chest unexpectedly. By the time their appetizers arrived, the tension she had carried into the restaurant had loosened, little by little. She noticed Jake still hadn't once stared at her chair, not even fleetingly. It was as if it didn't exist to him, and in that moment she didn't feel like the paralyzed CEO. She simply felt like a woman on a date. That realization made her pulse quicken, her defenses faltering. For the first time since the accident, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was still room for moments like this, where she could feel alive, normal, and even hopeful again. Claire picked at her entree, more interested in the man across the table than the food before her. She was still surprised at how easily Jake seemed to settle into conversation, how he hadn't faltered once or made her feel awkward. In her past experiences, silence often followed once her chair became the unspoken focus. Yet tonight, the silence that did come was comfortable, not suffocating. Jake didn't treat her as fragile porcelain. He teased, laughed, and leaned into stories with the kind of enthusiasm that pulled her in. It felt almost normal, and that normalcy was unexpectedly intoxicating. Jake leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table as he told her about growing up in a small town, fixing old cars with his father. His voice softened when he mentioned losing him at 18, and Claire saw the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "I guess that's when the garage became more than just work," he said quietly. "It became my way of keeping him close." Claire's chest tightened at his honesty. She wasn't used to such openness, especially not from someone she'd just met. It made her wonder why she felt so strangely safe around him. The night stretched on, and for the first time, Claire forgot to guard herself. She spoke of her company, the hurdles she faced as a woman in a male-dominated industry, and her pride in building something meaningful. Jake listened intently, never once looking bored or intimidated by her position. When she spoke of her accident, he didn't offer the usual expressions of pity or murmured apologies. Instead, he nodded solemnly and said, "That must have been hell, but you're still standing. Well, you know what I mean. You know what I..." His awkward but heartfelt attempt made her laugh, and she didn't feel broken for once. When dessert came, Jake ordered a slice of pie to share, sliding it between them with a grin. "I'm not eating this alone," he declared, his tone playfully. "Too firm." Claire raised an eyebrow. "And what if I don't like pie?" He smirked. "Then you'll break my heart and I'll never recover." She found herself smiling wider than she had in years, reaching for the fork. The simple act of sharing dessert felt oddly intimate, a reminder of something she thought she'd lost forever, the joy of small, ordinary moments. For a woman who lived behind walls, this felt like sunlight breaking through. At one point, Claire caught the waiter glancing at them, curious, maybe even surprised at the pair. In the past, she might have shrunk under the weight of that gaze. But tonight, she didn't care. She wasn't the wheelchair-bound CEO struggling to prove herself. She was just Claire, laughing at Jake's ridiculous jokes and savoring the warmth in her chest. For the first time since her accident, she realized she wasn't thinking about the chair, the limitations, or the pity. She was simply present, lost in the rare comfort of being seen for who she truly was. When the check arrived, Jake reached for it instinctively, but Claire quickly stopped him. "I can pay for myself," she said, her CEO instincts kicking in. He looked at her, amused. "I know you can, but tonight I want to. Don't think of it as me paying for you. Think of it as me paying for the chance to keep talking to you." His sincerity caught her off guard, softening her protest. For once, she let someone else take the lead. realizing that not every gesture was about control or pity. Sometimes it was simply about kindness. As they left the restaurant, Jake offered his arm without hesitation, not as a necessity, but as a gentlemanly gesture. Claire hesitated, then took it, feeling an odd mix of gratitude and disbelief. The cool Los Angeles night air brushed against her skin, carrying the faint hum of traffic. For years, she had avoided moments like this, afraid of being exposed, afraid of being reminded of what she'd lost. But walking, or rolling, beside Jake, she felt something stir that had been buried deep within her. The possibility of hope, the daring idea that maybe happiness wasn't out of reach. When they reached her car, Jake leaned against it casually, looking at her with a seriousness that softened his usual humor. "You probably weren't expecting tonight to go this way," he said. Claire smiled faintly. "No, I thought it would be a disaster." He chuckled. "So did I." For a long moment they simply looked at each other, the silence charged not with discomfort, but with connection. Claire hadn't smiled this much in years, and as she met Jake's gaze, she realized something she hadn't thought possible. Her heart wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready to let someone in again.